I'll just hold it for now.
Okay.
All right, so what we saw in the earlier test was we were able to simulate a failure, assuming that the hard drive and the RAID enclosure failed and all you had remaining was the one disk. Now this time we're going to do the opposite of this, where we're going to assume what if it was this one disk that failed and all we have remaining is the one hard drive, the enclosure. And you know, in theory our data should still be there, so what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to power it on. So Josh is my cameraman. I'm going to see if my data is still here on the one hard drive. So what we saw earlier was that data is still remaining on this one hard drive here. Now this test is going to be the opposite. We're going to see if data is still remaining here. So I'm going to plug it in. All right, so we're going to see if data is remaining on this other hard drive. All right, it's blinking. So again, we get the same alert where it said there's a problem with the drive, scan the drive now and fix it. But we're going to ignore that, and let's open this. All right, so we're going to go into, here it is, backgrounds. All right,
Hey.
there it is, folks. We see that the things that did make it over in the transfer are still here, and none of them appear to be corrupted in any way. We can still see all the pictures. And now one thing I actually want to get here is if you look at the RAID array, the RAID enclosure, you see that this guy's blinking, but this guy's empty.
Oh, what does that mean?
So what this means is actually it's good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why it's good is because it's blinking because it's trying to rebuild itself.
Right.
So usually when you have a RAID 1 array and you have a hard drive failure, usually most RAID arrays can rebuild themselves. So we see that it's trying to rebuild itself. What's bad here is that this is empty. There's nothing here.
Makes sense.
So we see that it's actually rebuilding into nothing.
Yeah.
So it looks like the software is not smart enough to recognize that it's actually an empty hard drive. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do something that's kind of crazy right now.
Oh.
I'm going to take this hard drive over here. I'm going to plug it back in. So could you hold this?
Oh my.
All right. So right now I'm actually going to format this hard drive. I'm going to plug it back into here, and then I'm going to see if it can rebuild itself.
Let's see.
All right, so we see this guy is kind of offline.
Yeah.
Well, to make sure it doesn't get confused, I'm going to unplug this one. I'm actually going to unplug it completely.
Oh.
So this guy's unplugged completely.
Goodbye.
And now we got this guy. So it looks like Windows is recognizing that it's weird. It's actually offline, so I'm going to make it online. I'm going to delete this volume. Delete it. Alright, so it's completely deleted. Alright, so now it's been completely deleted. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug this guy. Well, I guess I should eject it.
Yeah, you should.
I probably should eject it. Alright, I ejected it. Alright, so it's ejected. Alright, so it's gone from Windows. So this guy has just been freshly formatted. So I'm going to plug this back into the RAID enclosure. And alright, it's plugged back in. Well, actually, I need to turn this upside down. Plug it back in. Then I'm going to take the power cord, plug this guy back in. Turning it back on. Alright, plug it back in again. Alright, so we see there's a problem with this drive. Scan the drive now and fix it. And that's actually something we've been seeing for quite a while. But interestingly, if we click into here, let's see if we can still see our files. And it looks like we can actually still see our files. One thing that we'll notice is even though we see our files, if you zoom in here, it appears that the RAID enclosure has given up on trying to rebuild itself. what it should be trying to do is it should be trying to rebuild itself like we saw earlier.
Yeah.
When we saw that one of the drives was blinking because it was trying to rebuild itself.
Yeah.
But it couldn't rebuild itself because it was empty.
Oh.
So what we did was we formatted the hard drive, we plugged it in, and we hoped that it would rebuild itself. But as you can see here, it doesn't appearing to rebuild itself. So I didn't read the instruction manual about what the reset button does. It's actually right here, and it doesn't really specifically say what the reset button does. So I'm going to press the reset button, which will probably do one of two things. One, it'll reset the entire thing, or two, maybe it'll start to rebuild itself. So I'm going to hit the reset button and see if it's going to rebuild itself after I hit reset.
Exciting.
So you hold it for 5 seconds.
5.
I think that's been about 5 seconds.
Yeah, I think so.
So I'm going to let go.
Okay.
I'm going to see what happened. Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Oh.
So let me try hit the reset button again for 5 seconds. And I'm definitely hitting it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not resetting. So it could be in like a really weird state. So let me do the good old-fashioned reset by turning it off, turning it back on again. And let's see if it tries to rebuild itself. And it appears to still not be trying to rebuild itself, which is concerning. But what's really weird is it doesn't try to rebuild itself, but if you look into here, you can still see that you still have your files that you originally had. So even though it doesn't rebuild itself, at least you still have your files. What this means that you would have to take your files, you could move it to another hard drive, you would have to reformat it as RAID 1, and then that would give you, and then you have to transfer it back again. But most hard drives can rebuild themselves. But what was kind of concerning is we actually saw that it was trying to rebuild itself for a time, and then it failed. So the last testing I'm going to do to conclude is I'm going to turn it back off. I'm going to unplug this. I'm going to unplug this from the computer as well. And then I'm going to plug this back in to see if it rebuilt itself. Because if it rebuilt itself properly, if we click into here, oh, interesting. All right. So it looks like the hard drive actually did rebuild itself, because what we did was we took it out to simulate a failure. We formatted it. We put it back in, and then it started to rebuild itself. And you can see that all the pictures that we had earlier now exist on this hard drive again. And if we click through here, all our pictures have been rebuilt automatically. And this was without me doing anything. So I guess it just did it in the background without us knowing. And as a final test, let me actually turn this back on. So right now, again, it's a empty hard drive, and I'm gonna see if it's gonna try to rebuild itself. So again, we see the same thing where it's trying to rebuild itself, where you see it's blinking. I guess what's most worrisome for me is that right now it's a hardware failure.
Yeah.
One of the disks is missing, and it should be beeping, or at least put off an alarm, but instead of having an alarm, it looks like it just beeps with an LED, which I guess the blinking light would tell you that there's a hardware failure. Maybe it's not really trying to rebuild itself. Maybe this is like the hardware failure blinking LED.
But if you had maybe two connected, you wouldn't be able to really tell if it was writing or...
You wouldn't know. Yeah, maybe you don't know if one actually had a hardware failure. I mean, this one we know it was a hardware failure because we physically took the disk out, so that's definitely going to be a hardware failure. But the good thing is, though, that even though it wasn't doing this fast blinking, it looks like the hard drive was still able to rebuild itself, and all the files are there. And this concludes the rebuilding RAID 1 array test.
Hey.